Humans have a new hunter. Blade.
I think people love the Blade series because, in their own way, they have a strange kind of artistic integrity.
This is a big, crazy, unhinged action effects extravaganza.
It's a film of real scope.
Big explosions.
Hold on to your seat action.
New characters.
Jesus Christ! Blood-sucking immortals.
A lot more fun.
I'm a fan of vampires. The prospect of being able to play one, I thought would be really fun.
To get the opportunity to be in Blade 3 was a huge thrill.
Precious in me.
I was immediately interested when they said they wanted me to be in a movie where there are car crashes and stuff.
I've never done a movie that's this physically grueling.
You have to dig a little bit deeper to find that extra little thing.
The coolest, best, most rockin' Blade movie yet.
We got something for you, though. There's no question about that. I think fans are gonna love it.
Sorry I got old on you. I see you alone.
David wrote the first screenplay, he wrote the second screenplay, and he wrote the screenplay for the third movie as well.
At the very beginning, when I first pitched the idea of doing a Blade film to New Line, I pitched them 3 films, and they thought I was crazy at the time. This was back in 1994, so it was 10 years ago.
David came in a way, broke the mold.
We really try to defy expectations. And it's kind of cool because nobody ever expects these movies to be any good.
It was least likely to be the pioneer of this incredible renaissance of comics to film.
Originally, the studio had envisioned doing a much more low-budget, almost blaxploitation film, a $6 to $8 million film. And they didn't want to take the subject matter seriously, and I thought there was a potential for the movie to take itself very seriously. We reinvented Blade a bit from the comic books into the film. We had broader strokes in terms of our reinterpretation. He wasn't as well known as a character like Spider-Man or Batman, so we had more latitude in terms of what we could play with. In the comic books, Blade isn't even half vampire, so we had a bit more freedom there to explore the character. A lot of the vampire films, books, television shows before that had been kind of locked in the sort of more traditional, what I call Anne Rice mode, and we turned the whole vampire world on its head.
There's a reality to it that I really hooked into.
We reinvented the vampire mythology, so we've tried to explain how vampirism works more by scientific means. It's not supernaturally induced. Vampirism is a virus that progressively mutates the body and turns the subjects into another life form. Vampires are essentially another species. They can procreate, they're not undead. So we've tried to adhere to some kind of parameters of reality.
It's not so out of the realm of possibility. You know, there is a sort of scientific grounded history, and there certainly is a literary history to our knowledge of vampires and their fun.
So the movies are true.
Bram Stoker, he wrote a good yarn. Anytime you get into the third iteration, the third permutation of a film, you have to be sure that you're doing something different. There aren't many good sequels, and there are even less good third films, third chapters. So it's really important that you keep shaking things up, that you do something different. In the second film, Blade teamed up with the vampires. The third film, we wanted to drag Blade much more into the real world and have him interact with the FBI, the local cops, and things like that. And of course, the real world thinks he's absolutely crazy. In the first film, there's a line where Whistler says, there's a war going on, and from time to time, real people get caught in the crossfire. That's the story we wanted to tell for the third film. Well, the first film is almost word for word like my first pitch was to New Line for the first film. The second film is relatively close. The third film, originally, to be honest, I was going to do something much more ballsy and set the third film 50 years in the future, because Blade is an immortal. He doesn't really age. The vampires don't either. And I was going to set it in a world where the vampires had won completely, and it was much more like a Mad Max world, and the humans were resistance fighters. But at the end of the day, I think part of what makes the Blade films so much fun is seeing all this outrageous action play against a backdrop that it was somewhat familiar. And if we set it 50 years in the future, it might as well have been Planet of the Apes or something. So I decided to pull back the reins a little, and the battle for the world is happening now in this film. We're sort of at the tipping point. So it's still a world that we recognize, but the vampires are starting to take over.
He put Blade right in our world.
We're seeing that vampires are being integrated into society in a way that's truly frightening.
I'm hungry and I want to eat somebody.
We're catching fragments of a war that's spilling onto the streets.
Someone like Blade comes across as a complete psychopath.
And that's something that he's never really had to deal with.
And he's in trouble.
The one thing that this franchise taught me, just go with the people who feel really passionate about it. It's not a day job.
David Goyer created the franchise. He created the vibe of the films and the series. And this is the first Blade movie he's directed. It's the second feature he's directed. And as the guy who has been the only writer ever on the Blade franchise, it made perfect sense to be the next step for him and the next step for the movies.
It was my producers, Lynn Harris and Peter Frankfurt, that suggested I direct this. And I don't know why, I wasn't even thinking about it at the moment. And they asked me while I was about halfway through writing this third film. And I said, well, let's see how the script turns out. I wasn't sure how happy I was going to be with it. And once I finished the script, I said, yeah, I think I have to direct this. It's so much fun. And injecting the new blood of Hannibal King and Abigail Whistler made it even more fun.
The movies have really been fun because each director has brought a very unique, individual kind of take on the material. Norrington kind of created the grammar, the vocabulary, visually. And if you know Norrington and you see Blade, you really see how much of him, personality-wise and worldview-wise, is in that movie. And then Guillermo has a completely different sensibility than Norrington, and was able to just use Blade and Wesley as the common thread, but really bring his own signature to it. And that was fun. It was really fun as a producer to be able to work with two very different kinds of personalities and directors and visions.
There were still things in the first two films that I wasn't entirely happy with. There were also scenes in the first two films that got cut for one reason or another and never made it into the movie. So this time with the third film, with me in the directing seat, I said, we're gonna get those two scenes. One of them was a scene that was cut from the first film that appears on the DVD in the deleted scenes in a very truncated version, and answers the question, if the vampires win, where will they get their food supply? Well, this time we were able to do it right in the way that I originally envisioned it, in a much more bombastic way, and I think the audiences will be satisfied with that.
God in heaven.
The second big thing was I had an enormous chase sequence planned and was scripted for Blade 2, and we cut it for budgetary reasons. This time out, with me in the director's seat, I said, you know what, damn it, we're just gonna take that entire 8-page sequence and do all of it the way that I intended to for the second film, and the studio wanted to cut it again, and I dug my heels in and I said, no way, we're shooting it this time. So I can say that we got it all. They're very close to the way that they were scripted both in Blade 1 and in Blade 2. We tried to do something a little different in this film than perhaps the previous films.
It's a little demanding because we're trying to top ourselves, trying to give the audience more than we gave them before.
The first Blade film came out a year or so before The Matrix, and The Matrix came out, Blade 2, second and third Matrix films. By the time for us to do the third Blade film, I feel like influences from The Matrix and the Blade films has completely permeated the public consciousness. So you've got various other movies, TV series, even shows like Charmed doing wire work and wire fu work. Some of that's gotten old hat, and for a lot of the action I thought it would be interesting to take it backwards and go a little old school.
The action will still be devastating. No PG. No, hardcore.
I insisted that most of the stunts be done practically, that we have very little wire work, that we have almost no digital stuntmen in the film. We've got all the hand-to-hand combat that the Blade films are known for, but we've also got car chases. We've got foot chases. We wanted to set more of the action on locations and in and amongst the real world and real people and civilians, things like that. So we've got some other modes of action that we've never been able to play with because we've been mostly bound to stages and set work as opposed to being on location. The biggest challenge making this film is the fact that On any given day, we might have as many as 3 units shooting, 3 separate units. Like today, for instance, we've got 3 units shooting, and that's because in order to get the film done on time in as economical way as possible, we've had to have 2nd unit shooting bits and pieces, 3rd unit shooting bits and pieces. And so coordinating all those different units and making sure that there's continuity between them has been a bit of a challenge.
Just being out in the community and being out in the world and figuring out all of that stuff is always a logistical challenge, but no more so than any other action movie is my guess.
We've worked out the kinks by now.
These things are really hard.
We love blowing stuff up. I'm much happier when we're blowing stuff up.
Let me just say this, Blade is the house that David S. Goyer built.
David Goyer is Blade, he's the creator of Blade. As far as I'm concerned, he is the prophet.
He, along with Wesley, understands the character and this world as well as anyone, better than anyone.
David Goyer has a very particular vision, and a deep vision. That's what's so cool about it. It's got types of intelligence and humor that you just don't find in movies like this. You have to hold a lot of information and people in your head at the same time, and you have to be constantly thinking story, constantly thinking about the details at the same time.
There's a lot to control and have to like kind of be the father over a movie like this.
It's like wrangling a small army.
Action sequences take a long time, fight sequences take a long time.
We have to be finished pretty much on schedule, otherwise we'll blow our release date. So that is a constant sort of ticking time bomb in the back of my head and Goyer's head. I think that's the toughest, certainly dealing with very, very sophisticated physical action. Lots of very dynamic personalities who need to be properly managed. This is always a challenge.
We're working days, we're working nights. Usually it's 12 to 16 hours, so, you know, either we all love each other or either we're just at each other's throats. Like, if I really could bite you on the neck, I'd bite you on the neck.
3, 2, 1, action!
It's hard for a director to be able to coordinate all that and pay attention to the relationships between the different characters and develop the characters. So far, that's worked good.
David is a very collaborative director. He's able to articulate with the actors what he wants. He has a language that actors need.
He's an actor's director. He really watches for performance and really gives good notes.
He just knows how to communicate with them, which is a lot different than a lot of other directors, because most of them are technicians and don't have the words.
He can point you in the right direction, and he gives me a lot of help and pointers in ways that are easy for me to just grab onto and go with.
David Goyer's he's like smart, you know, sci-fi, geeky guy.
Just a truly gifted director, and it goes without saying that he's a gifted writer. He's like a painter, just perfecting the last little bits and pieces, and then he steps back and looks at it and goes, okay, I need to add this and that and this and that. And you know at the end of the day, you got everything. With David, you really know that if you are at home and in bed, you got it all.
It's an odd experience, but I love it. That's one of the things that's fun about movies is you never know who you're going to be partnered with or where you're going to find yourself. It's, you know, every day is a new day.
I met the director. I'm not really sure who that is. Which guy's that?
We got it on.
There's nothing stopping them now. It's me.
Shit, man, who the fuck ain't a fan of Blade movies?
I'm always drawn to anti-heroes.
There's something bad inside of me.
Blade's a great character.
He's a man who is unknowable.
He is a hero in spite of himself.
Not a happy camper.
He despises the whole idea of being a vampire.
Tortured.
And he's not even a particularly nice guy.
His life's purpose is to just simply kill vampires.
He's incredibly focused and incredibly intense.
He has this ability to capture the stoicism of a superhero.
Very shaded, nuanced.
The world isn't nice.
He ends up doing something for the benefit of humanity, but humanity doesn't really care that he helped them out.
You got 20 seconds.
Not really a good guy.
20.
He just knows the bad guys are worse.
In my mind, Wesley was always the perfect Blade. So when I was writing the first film, he was who I had in mind, and he was the first person that we went to, and fortunately, he said yes.
In casting all these actors, we look for an emotional range and a strength and a vulnerability and a complexity that each of these characters has to have, and of course the humor. So we pick out sides that show those colors.
I've changed my eyes. Not bad.
Very different, offbeat, character-driven actors, and that was the way we wanted to go with this film.
I'm a huge fan of Christopher Guest films, and A Mighty Wind came out, and I'd always wanted to work with Parker, and I sat down and tried to see how many people from A Mighty Wind could I fit in a Blade film. I thought it was so hysterical that you would take people from that cast and plunk them down into this cast.
What's your take on all these rumors we've been hearing about vampires? Vampires, vampires, what?
It's unusual that you get to come back 3 movies in a row and say, well, what can we do different with this character? How can we make this character grow? The third film is a story about Blade transitioning from a heroic figure to a mythic figure.
Blade is going to go through a tremendous emotional transformation here.
I felt it was important that Blade come right up against mortality. So Whistler does die, and then Blade is forced to team up with these kids.
Who the hell are you people?
He can't believe that this is the card that he's been dealt.
Sounds like rejects from a Saturday morning cartoon.
They're not as well trained, and they're not as powerful as Blade, and they lose their cool sometimes.
I'm pretty sure we saved your ass back there.
And it makes Blade angry, and it makes Blade frustrated that he has to rely on these kids, and it also makes Blade feel out of place.
Rookies.
I think Wesley is a perfect Blade because he's well trained in martial arts. It comes to him naturally. He has an innate understanding of action and movement and dance. But he's also a classically trained actor. And even though Blade is a man of few words, so much of what Wesley does with Blade, he imbues with all these beautiful little nuances.
He has a certain flourish to the way that he does things and a certain snap to his step. Kill you, motherfucker, I'll kill you. I'll just enjoy better. It's very distinct to him and to that character.
Most of it's physical in the same way that someone like Clint Eastwood will imbue the lead character in Unforgiven. It's always a challenge with me to try to have Blade speak as little as possible in the first act. I try to have him speak less than 10 lines in the first half an hour of the film. It takes a talented actor to be able to pull that off.
There are certain things that are written in the script, and then there are certain things that an actor brings to a role. And Wesley is very much fused with the creation of that character and his persona.
Wesley Snipes is Blade. There's really very little distance between he and the character. Wesley is kind of a Zen warrior himself.
He imbues that character with the sense of warrior-like severity and also a real sense of humor.
Oh, it's you?
And lightness.
Forgot my sword. Gucci go.
Couple that with his personal dedication to the study of martial arts, his expertise, his knowledge, sense of history and tradition, and you really end up with Blade.
You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody else that could play that role.
Blade finds himself face to face with his destiny, and then he has to fight the vampire of all vampires. Ultimately, there's an ending, and Blade realizes what his whole purpose in life had been.
Hannibal King and Abigail are very different and really, I think, cool additions to the Blade universe. And it's fun because I think, again, they'll defy audience expectations a little bit. They'll be a surprise.
Of course, doesn't have the range of a sword.
And it's also fun because they defy Blade's expectations.
You're kids. You're not ready to roll with this.
Blade doesn't really know how to deal with them.
Like it or not, we are all you got.
And that's a fun thing to watch.
You might want to consider blinking once in a while.
My relationship with King is very special because it's kind of the only family that she's got.
We have this like brother-sister bond because we started this whole thing together.
He hates me, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The interplay between she and Ryan
Thank you.
is sexy and fun.
Got your toys.
And energetic.
Try to keep up. It has been brother and sister in the past. I think now that they're in this really intense situation.
Eventually, Abigail found me.
When you read between the lines, there's definitely some intimate sexual tension going on.
And that's basically turning a frown upside down.
I think at the moment a little more brother and sister, but could possibly turn into something a little bit more intimate.
Abigail, the lost daughter of Whistler himself, she understands how awful the enemy is.
She's really peeved that the vampires are after her family, and she's gonna take her revenge. She can fight the vampires just as well as all the men in the movie. It's really wonderful to play an equal.
Scream if this hurts, chica.
Physically and mentally.
Abigail Whistler is a woman of very few words, and so she has to imbue that character with a lot of physicality and a lot of presence. And again, it's something that's very difficult to do, and she does it very well. The scenes that she's in, she completely owns, and she definitely gives Wesley a run for his money.
She really idolizes Blade.
Are you all right?
And looks to him as a replacement father because he's been such a factor in her life, even though she hasn't met him until 5 days ago.
Don't let it turn inward.
She's also kind of a closed character. She has a couple really wonderful, vulnerable moments.
I'll just die.
Zoe.
Whistler.
Jessica Biel, she has given this film a tremendous grace. Not only that, you have Ryan Reynolds. Ryan brings something which is also very interesting, a jovial, streetwise attitude to that fight.
Hannibal King is an acerbic vampire hunter.
This dog has a bigger dick than you. You suck your own dick with that mouth?
I was talking to her!
What's different about Hannibal as opposed to Blade is Hannibal's defense is humor.
And somehow I don't picture you teaching karate at the local Y.
And also Hannibal King sometimes serves as the audience's proxy because he doesn't view himself as an action hero in the way that Blade obviously does, or even Abigail Whistler does. He's just a normal guy that kind of got caught up in these horrific circumstances.
Her fangs are located in her vagina.
So it's fun to play this character that doesn't take himself so seriously to the point where he's just always got this mean face on and he's just blood and carnage everywhere. He's also got this very unpredictable light side that comes out at certain moments in the movie.
I ate a lot of garlic. And I just farted.
Ryan is a terrific actor.
Silent but deadly.
He writes a lot of his own material, and he and I have had a lot of fun working together and coming up with little beats for Hannibal.
Your hairdo is ridiculous.
Acting with Ryan Reynolds has been like the cheekiest. I've never seen it acted with anyone so incredibly cheeky.
How about you take a sugar-frosted fuck off the end of my dick?
I mean, he is just has those lines and he just spits them out, and he's really funny.
It's in my right ass cheek.
And I also just love the fact that when it comes time to go to battle, he's just like flips into this one-note killing machine.
And King can kick ass, but he kicks ass with a certain degree of irony. That's a hard thing to master, but it's like falling off a log for Ryan.
It was fun to sort of play a character that has these two sides.
Dracula. I mean, even Blade was like, come on, Dracula?
You know, he's a real badass. He's so bad.
Dominic plays Drake because he's just creepy. He's just plain creepy.
Jimmy Morrison on steroids.
He's made me believe that this character is 7,000 years old. There's just something in his eyes besides red contact lenses.
It's hard to get away from the fangs and the eyes and stuff. But I just wanted to bring a different slant to Dracula.
He carries a certain low-boiling rage. He could be a threat.
He's a good physical anchor for Blade and somebody who will do well when they're fighting one-on-one.
When Blade and Drake come together, it's just the clash of the titans, the best of the best. Blade is invincible, you know, but I think he's met his challenge.
Dominic is absolutely a great nemesis.
The ending of the film is intriguing. We see for the first time a redeeming quality in Drake.
I don't need to survive the future.
He does something very special, and that is one of the things that really attracted me to the part.
The humans have a new hunter. Blade.
Danica Talos is played by Parker Posey.
My role in it is to be the female vampire, the heavy one. Oh, did I hit you? No. Who gets to gnash her teeth and kiss and just kind of, we use them, you know, go all out.
To flesh it out.
She's hilarious and scary and gets to do some physical action, which she's never done in a movie before.
I like your tattoos. Do they mean anything?
Well, her energy is so completely different from Wesley's.
Are you tired?
When the two of them are together, it's interesting to watch.
I just thought it'd be fun to play as someone who wasn't human, who had been around for 500, 600 years, try to make her kind of a snob, blasé. Nothing's fun anymore after a certain point. You know, so you bring that kind of attitude in there, that kind of arrogance. I'm gonna go in. All the old vampire movies and, you know, those characters are like creepy and just to be really creepy at the same time arresting.
She's also the one that made me a vampire.
King was kind of my pet for a while, and I would tell him to do things that he would, you know. Because that's the kind of relationship Danica has with guys, you know. It's very sadomasochistic, and I mean, she's basically bored. I mean, you know, she's been around for 500, 600 years, just trying to make it interesting, you know.
He basically lives to kill her.
Maybe it's time I join the game.
Dracula has come into their lives now, so she's kind of like a weird kind of love story that they have between each other. That's how I look at it, but, you know.
Drake wants to beep Danica. He's been asleep for 6,000 years, so I think it's pretty understandable that that would be one of the first things to go through one's mind.
He has this relationship to sunlight that it doesn't harm him. So that becomes a metaphor for love and respect. I mean, love and respect to these two vampires.
There's no romance between Drake and Danica. Well, not really. I wouldn't think. The way I'm playing it, there isn't.
She's waited a long time for a man to really come and sweep her off her feet and to have fun with and be able to spend time with, and, you know, she respects him, and I thought that was a really funny and almost cute aspect of the script. I think people are kind of fascinated with the vampires because, well, they can live forever and they make a moral choice. It's a vanity choice to be able to live forever and feed off of other people. But I think subconsciously the reason why people relate to it is that it's a metaphor of addiction, of insatiable desire, of arrogance.
I don't know what it is about vampire movies that people like. I'm not really big on killing anybody, you know? But if you have to kill somebody, you might as well be a vampire.
The weight that Chris carries as a man, as an actor, as that character, I think really has always given the movie a great grounding.
And the connection works so well between Whistler and Blade.
I see you alone, surrounded by enemies. Kind of like a father-son relationship, and I don't have a hard time with that, having 8 kids myself. Killing humans is messy. You better hope nobody ID'd you. I like Whistler's loyalty to Blade.
Friends.
Yeah. You remember those? He doesn't beat around the bush, and he is a pretty direct commentator on what's going on.
What about this one?
He unfortunately dies in this movie, but he's come back to life before, so you never know.
Dude, you're dead.
What Jessica and Ryan and Dominic are going through, that's training. What I did was research. Well, I did actually go down to the Braille Institute in California. I mean, it was amazing to witness how together, and it was great to not feel sorry for them and to not feel uncomfortable. You know, just going and walking around. There was one lady, Carmen, who actually was, I guess she ran the Institute, and just seeing how put together she was, you know, like that she was in a suit and that she was wearing mascara, and she was just really, I mean, there was no, like, pity there.
Stay Star's viral efficacy.
It's not the kind of thing where, like, just because you're blind, you can't figure anything out.
Biomedica Enterprises.
Tech polymerase.
Bone marrow growth
Genetic
supplement. Sequencing enzyme.
I've never taken an acting lesson, so I actually took my first acting lesson for this movie just to, you know, make sure that I didn't do that. Like, I can't see you.
I want you to hide, okay? Like we talked about. Go on.
Get out of here, Zoe! Hide! God damn it, Zoe!
Triple H, I mean, what a marvelous man.
Fucking ass raped! Jocko Grimwood is skinny bookworm type guy. One of the things that makes the WWE superstars so adept at getting into acting in films and other versions of television is
Cute, huh?
we go out on a weekly basis and put ourselves into characters that we have to invest ourselves in emotionally.
Fuck face!
Sometimes we have to tone it down a little bit because, you know, when you play for 50,000 people that are quite a distance away in the rafters, you know, you have to be larger than life. So you have to tone it down a little bit for the cameras.
You're not so big.
Because it's more intimate. But I think we're well trained for the role.
We got him.
It's a real mixture of people, and I think just by bunching them all together and being able to put them all in a movie should be interesting, you know.
Dr. Vance, John Michael Higgins, genius.
I think somebody here wants to talk about vampires. I think in Hollywood, you end up playing bad guys a lot if you speak well, if you have language, because bad guys are, you know, educated, which is a very bad thing in America, apparently.
Symptoms of this disease are remarkably similar to classic vampire traits.
When his usefulness expires, I become a victim of hideous special effects. What kind of a movie is this? I've always wanted to die a horrible death. And for some reason, this morning they shaved my chest. It's kind of exciting, actually. I'm gonna go home to my wife and be like a male stripper.
Man is my prisoner. Don't fuck with my thing.
There's a team from the hospital affecting the transfer.
Come on, Chief.
I'm still not sure why they did it. Do you think it was sexual? God, I hadn't thought of that. No one's thought of me as a sexual being for 20 years. He's psychotic.
I had a wonderful actor by the name of Mark Berry, who was my reader. He did a terrific job. He would read with every actor that came into the room, and he landed a lead role.
The only vampires I'm worried about are the ones passing the bar exam.
Overall, it's by far the most exciting ensemble we've had in a Blade movie.
All right, Vance, what the hell do you know? Realization.
Yes, fine.
Abby, it's Drake! Abby, it's Drake! Abby, it's Drake!
It's just a terrific, terrific ensemble cast, and we're very excited.
Ryan, Jessica, Dominic, they were all training a good 3 months before they started shooting every day, 4 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You want to really believe that Abigail kicks ass. You want to really believe that when she goes after 4 or 5 vampires, you believe that this girl could take down several large men. And you believe it of Ryan, and you believe it of Dom, and certainly you've always been able to believe it of Wes.
I think it's got something to do with how we view superheroes these days. You haven't got a six-pack and a big chest and shoulders. People don't buy it somehow.
Wesley's always in sort of phenomenal shape and is a martial artist and is well-skilled and very well-trained.
I work out every day. I'll do something, either some calisthenics or, you know, some Pilates, some stretching, some kicking, a little boxing, you know, a little yoga, little sleep. Should get more sleep, that's the key.
The trainer, before we started the film, wanted to pack on about 10 pounds on me and muscle up. You know, you gotta be able to lift people over your head and throw them around and fight blood-sucking vampires.
I've had to go through a lot of serious training, and it's been really fun. Lots of weight training, lots of cardio, lots of running. Lean down, gain more muscle, lose body fat. I would work out for an hour and a half, doing like 45 minutes of cardio and then a full hour of weightlifting. Then I would go to an hour of martial arts and then an hour of archery, and then I would fall asleep. And that would be an everyday thing.
Both Ryan and Jessica were beautiful physical specimens before they started training. But Ryan's at something like 3.8% body fat. Jessica's at like 8% or 6%, something insane. You know, you and I are probably at like 48% body fat. So they're on like a whole different plane. And it shows in the movie. I mean, they're ripped.
We're on this very high intensive protein, complex carb diet.
It's all about the diet and the exercise, I really have discovered.
Getting up in the morning, having oatmeal and then a protein shake, and then eating 2 hours later. I mean, I'm having to eat every 2 hours.
Eating 3 big meals a day, not good. Your metabolism is slower. What you really would love to do in a perfect world is have 6 to 8 small meals a day.
Tub of tuna with vegetables, and then chicken breasts with lettuce, and then protein shake, and then protein bars, and it's like,
I'm eating drywall and wood chips, mostly.
Give me a pizza!
So you'll already be there.
They've also been training with fight specialists, fight coordinators.
I was the fight choreographer, AKA the fight guy, and I was in charge of putting together a lot of the fights and the action.
They each have their own skill set and their own martial arts specific training. Dominic has been doing a lot of sword fighting. Ryan has been doing a lot of just sort of straight martial arts and boxing. Jess has been doing a lot of boxing, kickboxing, archery, and they've all been doing shooting.
Before Hong Kong came in, with the more stylized fighting and the action like that, you didn't need it so much. But now it's gotten a little bit more stylized, and there's techniques to be learned and techniques to be taught. And a lot of the actors also now want to do their own action. So since the actors are doing it, they have to have somebody to train them. They have to have somebody that knows that type of stylized action. So you need fight choreographers now. People make it up, but it doesn't turn out so great. So it's good to have somebody that has some kind of background.
Their training has been consistent of movement work as far as stances go, kicks, throwing punches, a little sword work, and they've all been great.
I've had to go through a lot of serious training.
Working with Jessica has been, what can I say? It's been incredible. She's awesome. She's a great physical specimen, number one, and she's got a great attitude, and she's capable of doing almost anything we throw at her.
Martial arts training. Not one specific martial arts, but the whole gamut of all different kinds. We use one move from Savat, and then we use another move from wherever. I mean, right next to each other. And a lot of boxing, too. It's very much like raw street fighting.
She started training as soon as she got the role, and she kicks ass. I mean, you know, we didn't have a huge amount of time to prepare with her. So I called up one of the fight coordinators, and I said, how we doing? How's Jess? Is she gonna be right? She goes, oh man, she's got knowledge. She's gifted. So I was in like a month early, and which is not a lot of time. Not a lot of time to train for a movie like that with a lot of action, especially as much action as they had to do.
The archery was the hardest. It's really specific positions and how high your elbow is and how you squeeze your back. You squeeze your back in a way that you've never felt before, if you've never done archery before, and it's incredibly difficult to get used to that. So I'd say archery has been my most challenging, and the martial arts has just been fun. I mean, very hard and gets you very sore, but that's just really fun for me.
She's a very quick learner. She's been able to go toe for toe, step for step, right along the way. She's been awesome.
The fight training has been really interesting. I just found it to be like a dance. It truly is a choreographed dance.
It's a deadly dance. That's pretty much it. You can get hurt.
If you remove the aspect of violence out of it, it really is beautiful.
I used to do chop socky films myself as an actor, so I kind of brought what I learned from the Hong Kong guys here, and then now I'm teaching it to other people.
I have a huge appreciation for what these people do.
The trainers that we're working with, Chuck Jeffries and Clay, they're so talented. What they do that's so interesting that no other martial artist that I've ever met or I've ever worked with has done this before, has taken something from our own lives and applied it to this. So he knew that I take ballet, and so he explained to me, in this spinning hook kick, I need to spot my person before I throw the kick. And he was trying to get me to look at the person, and I never did. And he was like, spot them. And it made sense to me. And like Dominic, who plays Drake, he's a golfer and he plays cricket, and Dom has to work with all these swords. So Chuck says, now hit the cricket ball.
Depending upon their skills and what they do already, we'll build a fight sometimes based off of what they already know, so they correlate. So if you're a good golf guy, then we'll say, okay, you got to do a sword in this movie, which like Dominic had to do sword. And he likes golf, he likes cricket, tennis. Okay, we'll build it off of that. So at first, his movements are more tennis, cricket, stuff like that. But as we keep going and going and going and adding the violence to it and adding the technique to it, it becomes sword fighting, which ends up being his style.
None of us have ever worked with swords or knives or, you know, martial arts, any of this stuff. So that's how it's becoming really easy for me. He's making it like a dance. He's making it like steps in a routine, so I can understand it, and then he will personalize it for Ryan so Ryan can understand it, and so forth for everybody else.
Ryan's been an incredibly pleasing student also. He's very capable of doing what we need him to do. His character's a little less flashy than Blade or Abigail or any of the others. He's more or less a brawler and kind of a jokester. He's just taken to it like it's second nature also. They really get into it.
They've taken it very seriously. They're in phenomenal shape.
Ryan and Jessica have been incredible students. They've progressed rather well. You know, we were very surprised and very pleased.
50% of what they're doing is the fight. The other 50% is acting.
You look so distraught!
I worked with Marco Pozzi in the interrogation room.
And then, when you can't stand it anymore,
She's, you know, she's a very interesting individual.
so distraught!
The special training has been a revelation in torture.
It's impressive to see how hard they've worked and how far they've come.
All I've ever really done are comedies before, so this is something totally new for me. So it's a tough thing when you work 14, 15-hour day and then you have to get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning and go lift weights for 2 hours and then go to work all day. So it's been hard. It's weird, you know, our body doesn't feel the same. I can't, you know, nothing fits the same way. It's all a little strange, but you get into it. You love it in the long run. You're so thankful and grateful that you had the opportunity to change like that and really jump into a character.
I feel really good. I'm definitely in the best shape I've been in my whole life.
How can you feel like $1 million when you're in shape, when you're always exhausted? Like, when you're always working out, you never feel what it's like to be, you know, fully strong. I just always feel like, whoa, God, my chest feels like somebody, like, drove a truck over it. You know, so what's the point? I don't know.
It's really hard. Yeah. I'm just going to light up and have a cigarette now.
This is all prosthetics.
Yeah.
We've got a prosthetic six-pack on him. It took 4 hours to apply.
I'm actually a 4-year-old Asian peasant girl.
Yeah.
Well, these action movies are getting harder and harder, you know. I mean, I like the character, but I can tell you, you know, I'm getting a little sore and sore every day.
Right from the get-go, David did want to do something new and fresh for Blade. Working with David all along has been great. Very open to new ideas. He's very specific about what's important to him, but also gives you enough leeway to experiment and try something new. He's allowed me a lot of freedom to really challenge myself and experiment with my team, trying to get the most dynamic sets we possibly can.
I'm always really eager to provide references and my thoughts on how things might look or how things could work. And David is a really great collaborator in that he really seeks that out.
Tyruban Ellingson is one of the best in the business. He's worked on Blade 2. And he was the first person I called. He's responsible for the design of a lot of the weapons. He had some influence in the costumes, in Drake's armor. He comes up with all sorts of fascinating ideas.
The design aesthetic is always, with the vampires, very high end. And with Blade and Whistler, it's very much like, get the job done, let's strip it down, let's just make it work. So that kind of established the two kinds of designs.
As production designer, I'm in charge of presenting all the environments, settings, sets, and locations to tell the story. David had written this third script with a completely new vision compared to the other two movies. This one being written as a very modern approach to vampires in the city, a modern city, a dense city, a corporate city. And the vampires, corporate bloodsuckers, live on top of this city and kind of reign the world from there. You'll see in the approach to the design, we actually threaded through this very modern layer of architecture and set design and set dressing. Through those kind of departments of city officials, and the police department's very sleek and very modern and clean. That all relates stylistically to the Phoenix Towers. So you get a sense of perhaps the vampire control throughout the entire world. And then things like the Night Stalkers, Blade and Whistler's safe house, and our other hideouts. They're very textured and edge city, so we'd have a great contrast between what the vampires were in control of, very stylized society of the vampire world, and then this battling force climbing the mountain to slay the dragon on the hill kind of approach. We're standing now in the Phoenix Towers. As scripted, David described a modern space of steel and glass, so that was our first initiative. And then the action described in this script was very kinetic and vertical. So we wanted to design a set that had those elements. So we found one of the biggest stages in town, and we're able to go vertically as well as lengthwise to really spread out the action. And with the three characters, Blade, Abigail, and King, We wanted each of them to have a zone where they could battle, and then with the verticality, David had scripted large falls for the characters as they fought. This entire structure was completely engineered, so this large truss pretty much hangs from the building. We had to first study the building, make sure it was still structurally sound, and then calculate, obviously, the weight and what kind of loads we would add to the building to support our truss. And we have it down to the pound on how much we can actually hang off the building. This building was used to build all the bridges here in Vancouver at one time. That's what's called the Bridge Studios. They're digging on our bridge that we have built inside. Early on in development, they were thinking perhaps it was 2 locations. I proposed this one large set to contain all the action as opposed to break it up between 2 separate sets, so all the characters would end up in one big space. I always thought it'd be great to have this one main element of a truss cutting through the set to allow Abigail to, and all the action essentially, to traverse through the set and find itself in one place. This here is the truss that Abigail will have her action sequence on. We're average about 40 feet above the studio floor, and each one of these triangles will have a piece of glass in to obstruct her clean shot. This ramp system, Blade, will come up and fight vampires all the way up until he reaches the 3rd level, which is the conference room, where Blade will face off with Drake, kind of in an old Western standoff with the large conference table between them. Work their way across to this exterior rooftop, and then that fight is designed now to fall off that rooftop and land in the exterior plaza below. So the whole set was designed to move the action towards this final moment of that final arrow shot. The other interesting thing about vampires is they get killed by UV light. So the penthouse, the Phoenix Tower penthouse, being on top of the world is, the irony is it's closest to the sun. So we approached it as if they moved into this large cap to a tower and actually had to retrofit sunscreening devices. And so we looked at sun reflectors that NASA may use. Pulling that thread through the design, we were able to create new and exciting textures on walls. This whole place is designed as a sunscreen, basically, and all the surfaces you see are to block sunlight, and that's why you see layers of thermal screening, reflective materials, and other textural fabrics and things. Danica, being the queen bee of it all, has the most elaborate system. There's a scene where Drake threatens Danica with sunlight. So we wanted to have a louver system and fire a light down through so it feels like an exterior wall.
The Night Stalkers, because they're the humans, they're disenfranchised, they don't have as much money as the vampires. They lead a more of a ragtag existence, and so their worlds are a little bleaker, a little more cluttered.
The Night Stalkers headquarters is this barge that was a restaurant for Expo 86 and has been sitting out off the coast of Vancouver for years. And I got to thinking, what if we dragged this barge into port and turned it into our Night Stalkers lair? And it's just a shell with windows, and we're putting in all the technology, all the weapons, the armory, everything the Night Stalkers do to slay vampires.
I'm impressed.
Welcome to the ziggurat. These stairs will play as 2 things, the base of the ziggurat stairs, and then when we get to the top, we'll double it as the top of the stairs as well. So this is the staircase after it's revealed that the vampires go down several flights of stairs, and we pick them up coming down into the other set piece where they find Dracula several stories underground over on this set. Obviously a work in progress, but this staircase here is where the vampires will continue down, and we've crumbled this set to show that it's thousands of years old. We've done a very crude version of early cuneiform with carved artwork, and then also Drake's glyph is hidden amongst all this cuneiform for those who want to pause the DVD and find it in the movie. All these walls come right up to these columns to enclose the whole set, so they're just pulled off now so we can shoot into the set, making the set feel larger than it actually is. Flashlights and lanterns, and that's pretty much what's going to light this set. So we want to make it very textural, so when the flashlight goes across it, there's always something going on and it doesn't flatten out on us.
What's this chicken scratch?
Construction crew's pretty small to do a set like this. We get some great artists who can carve foam, and then it goes pretty quickly. using very simple tools and chainsaws even to rough it in. And then the paint team will come in and add actual sand to really tie it into the location.
Costume designer's job is to come up with concepts in conjunction with the director and the actors and implement them, whether that be designing from scratch and having costumes built, or finding items and putting them together in unique and interesting ways. A psychological journey, really, into the mind of a character, because it's basically how they choose to present themselves to the world. And it says so much about who they are as a character. Every choice that we make helps the actor become the character. At the beginning of any project, one thing that I like to do is pull together a lot of images, comic books, swatches of fabric, color samples. I put them together on character boards. With that, I then would start the sketch process. I also worked a lot with Tyruban Ellingson in the beginning for some of the other characters like Drake. It was important to us that we not do the same look that we did in either of the other movies. Make it a little bit more bohemian, a little bit more worldly, a little bit more multicultural. Take elements that were high fashion, because the vampires are a super sort of slick group that obviously are very vain and narcissistic, but also just show their history throughout the timeline. Here we are on my wardrobe truck. This is my dog Hunter, the mascot of our department. Don't mind the zipper down the side, a vampire got her. In terms of Blaide's costume, I did want to play with different textures and the way light hit it. We then covered with a mesh fabric, which is very much a fabric used in a lot of protective gear in various sports. And these are the buckles that attach to this scabbard back piece. This scabbard holds his sword. We developed it on this rotating element here so that when it's on Wes's back, he can actually push the bottom and the whole sword rotates to the side so that he can actually lift his sword out. And it's amazing that Wesley can do this. He's the only man alive that can. With the new design for the Blade jacket, we dyed Thai silk. It starts with a saffron color and then ends down at the bottom with a rich burgundy. And this was taken from Buddhist monks and the colors of Thailand.
You're not ready to roll with this. I mean, look at the way you dressed.
Blade has very stylized costumes. He is a superhero. He has arrived at superhero status. The Night Stalkers are still scrapping it out as more of a grassroots organization. So there's lots of elements of the costumes, the protective wear and stuff like that, that are things that we found in the world that we just sort of augmented and changed to work for them. This actually is a vest that's used by jockeys. It's a padded vest, and it's in case they get thrown off the horse to protect them from any sort of injuries. It's articulated, it moves really nicely, and on Ryan's hot little body, it looks really super sassy. When we first see Abigail, she's dressed like a waif and becomes this super cool killing machine. And it was really neat because actually one of our producers didn't even recognize her when she was sitting in her chair. Some of our first ideas for Abigail were that we thought she could be in Army-Navy pants and little t-shirts. I really wanted there to be elements in Abigail's character that kind of harken back to the fact that she is Whistler's daughter. From those first ideas, we kind of morphed her a little bit along into a bit more of a punched up version of those things, making sure that her clothes fit her quite nicely so that they looked good, also making sure that they fit her in a way that she could be an ass kicker. We see the arc of her character start going a little bit more comic book when she starts hanging with Blade a little bit more. I pulled in the colors of Blade's world into Abigail's world to start showing kind of their relationship together and the influence that Blade has on Abigail. We thought there should be an irony with some of their characters, and we brought that out in King's character most of all.
Evening, ladies.
This one I wanted to look a lot like the street art that you see on the sides of the walls of buildings. Like this guy just took a couple spray paint cans and some masking tape and he made himself this bullseye, just an in-your-face type of thing. We took this otherwise normal, everyday, run-and-punch guy and made him this superhero kind of, in a way, against his own will. He fell into the role because he had bad taste in women.
Her fangs are located in her vagina.
Here we are with Danica. Danica's pieces are very much based on ethnic influences and also the fashions of today. Those pieces are very modern, but the shapes and the colors are derivative of other places and other times. We went to Saks Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, where I had one of my assistants purchase a couple of really lovely, super, super high fashion suits. It's her version of being a regular person at the tune of several thousands of dollars.
Let's roll, please.
We actually copied a dress that we had bought that was really, really beautiful on her body, but I really, really, really wanted it in this amazing color. Especially with Parker's amazing contacts that they put in her, which are this amazing blue-green. These vibrant blues and greens just really, really looked striking with her. Fantastic. We purchased most of Danica's costumes in New York City, actually. These were purchased pieces, but we took them and changed their shape and brought some of the super fun lining out to the front of it. And this has the kimono sleeves. One of the ideas that Parker had, which was brilliant, was just getting a bunch of animal skins. Not fur coats, but animal skins. And she drapes them on and wears them in some perverse ways, which are super cool, like pulling the tail through the eyeball, stuff like that. You know, stuff that a vampire might do. With Drake, we didn't want to go too over the top. We didn't want him to be too super slick, but we also didn't want him to be too hippy-dippy. He had to look like the king of the vampires. It was his accessories that created that look. His jewelry immediately made Dom feel like Drake. Whenever he puts his jewelry on, it's like he's arrived. He is the character. This is the underpinnings to the full suit of armor that he wears as the Beast. Quite an exciting costume.
Blade. Ready to die.
It goes something like this. Dom did a lot of work practicing his sword work, and so it was really important that with this armor he could move and function really well. We really wanted to highlight that he's been around pretty much forever. This arm here has elements that harken back to samurai and other time periods. We have some encrusted jewels in here. We've done some aging with various acids. The gauntlet hand has both metal and it has elements that are bronze. And it's just aged down and battle scarred.
Everything that I'm doing is permeated by the ideas and by the mind, the incredible mind of David Goyer.
The real world, real people being on location.
They just look so beautiful, these movies.
It's not glossy, it's not shiny mirrors. There's a very rustic, earthy color.
I felt that the first two Blade films had a very distinctive look from one another.
The first movie was very in the world. The second movie went underground, became a little more stylized, a little more unto itself. This movie aims to go back into the world.
And the third film also should have a very distinctive look.
Gabriel Beristain shot the last movie, and he's shooting this one. And I think one of the reasons why he was excited to come back was to work with Goyer.
Here we have David Goyer, who is the one who has adapted the story into these wonderful scripts, telling me, I want you to create something completely unique for this film. This is urban. This is gritty. This is a film that happens in the city. This is a film that for first time, Blade confronts and kills real people. So it takes Blade to a completely different level, and it takes the photography and my camera work to a completely different level. The locations define our palette. We are taking all the range of colors because that is what the city is. The rusty colors, the earthy are very important for certain areas. But at the same time, when you come out into the city, you are into the big glass and metal. For first time, you're gonna see bright sets, an explosion, not an explosion of color, but yes, an explosion of light. And because it's the whole environment in which Blade is gonna be entering emotionally. And I want my lighting and the cameras to really respond to those emotions that this new Blade is gonna be confronting himself.
His approach to shooting the film was to have these very dynamic, moving cameras, a lot of handheld, a lot of crane and dolly work, so the camera's always moving through space.
I'll look up and I'll find cameras that are like all over the place where I never knew that they were. I mean, there's guys shoot with like 6, 7, 8 cameras at a time, and I've never done a movie like that. I mean, there's probably a camera arthroscopically in me right now.
Very seldom you see a setup that I produce which doesn't have at least 3 cameras. Some directors don't like it. David has embraced that, and he is really using it in the most productive manner.
Shoot him! Go ahead, Blade. Show me what you're made of.
Even though Gabby has all these cameras, most of the time the cameras are not in each other's shots. Now, that's a miracle, especially when you're shooting 270 degrees around something. How are they doing that?
Jessica did all of her own archery work in the film, and we needed her to fire an arrow towards the camera, and in order to protect the crew and the camera, we had everything walled off with plexiglass, and so that everyone would be safe. And the only thing that wasn't walled off was a little 2x2 square directly in front of the lens of the camera. She was firing from about 40 feet away and also from about 50 feet up in the air. And she'd been practicing so well, she hit a complete bullseye, and the arrow embedded itself about 6 inches into the camera, went through the lens, and ended up destroying about a $300,000 camera. We ended up destroying quite a few cameras over the course of the film, which I guess isn't really a badge of honor, but these things happen sometimes. We got our insurance worth for the cameras of the film.
It's a really powerful kind of European look. I'm not sure if I'm speaking out of my ass, but
There is this unifying common thread that goes in 1, 2, and this one, and that's Wes, that's Blade. He's so distinctive in his look and his bearing, and that doesn't change.
Nice.
There are a number of cameos, mostly from crew members in the film. The most prominent one is Gabriel Beristain, my director of photography. Kind of an inside joke, the fact that he's director of photography, we gave him an eye patch. At the end of the film, one of the medical examiners is Chris Gorek, our production designer. Script supervisor, Janet Monroe, is also one of the medical examiners. Lynn Harris, one of our producers, ended up standing in for Parker Posey's shadow.
Good luck, Lynn.
Her shadow wouldn't appear on the wall, and the way things were lit when she had to synchronize her movements to what Parker was doing.
What the hell are you doing here?
I made a cameo in a scene that was ultimately cut from the theatrical version. Since I was pushing all my actors to do all these crazy stunts, I thought it was fair to try it myself a few times. Ultimately, we cut the scene not because of my performance, but I certainly wasn't, the scene just didn't work for the film. I was having a meeting one day with my production designer and my director of photography. And one of the things we were talking about is the fact that most major cities have an official or unofficial secondary language. We'd never stated where this city was, and we just thought it would be interesting to have a secondary language. It was either Gabby or Chris suggested that we use Esperanto, a universal language that was created around the turn of the century. The idea was it will be this universal language and everyone will speak it in the world, and we'll pull elements from English and French and Spanish. It never really took off. I said, yes, absolutely, let's use Esperanto. So all of the signage that appears in the movie will appear in English and then beneath that in Esperanto. Also, I decided we would have this scene in which Whistler is actually speaking in Esperanto to the news vendor. One of the funniest things I've ever seen was Chris Christopherson in his trailer, in his Whistler getup, spending hours repeating these Esperanto lines over and over again. He was so concerned that he'd get them right, and it was really endearing. There was a film made that was all in Esperanto, and it starred William Shatner. It's called The Incubus. I just insisted, for completion's sake, that we have that. It's just a little kind of Easter egg, I guess, for the audiences. On my first day of shooting, the entire crew were wearing temporary tattoos that were cartoon representation of me, showing my own tattoos, and it said, "Got blood" on my chest. I think it was instigated by one of our producers, Lynn Harris, and Chris Gorek, our production designer. Bizarre terminology.
flesh is what remains of the vampire once they've been destroyed. It's an exciting idea because your last moment is this implosion or explosion of fire and chaos.
We have a wide assortment of ass kickery for your viewing pleasure today.
Mega damage.
They worked so hard on making themselves proficient in their craft of ass kickery.
There was lots of ass kickery in this movie. Lots of ass kickery.
The weapon that the Night Stalkers are developing is a biological weapon.
For the last year, I've been working with synthesized DNA in order to create an artificial virus targeted specifically at vampires. We're calling it Daystalk.
It's a weapon that could be used only against Drake. If you can get it into Drake, he could then spread it to every other vampire on the planet.
A daywalker has the ability to walk in daylight. It's a human being. Is it a human being?
He's a person who is a vampire, but who has the ability to go out in the daytime and handle the UV rays of the sun.
There are only two daywalkers that exist on planet Earth. One is Blade, and also Drake, the Dracula character.
The familiar is a human that works for the vampires.
Familiar is anyone that works with the vampires that has high hopes to become a vampire.
If you're a good familiar, you'll get bitten, and that's their goal.
The Night Stalkers are a gang of gremlins. They're a gang of hooligans, mess of mooks. They're a bunch of kids.
The Night Stalkers are a kind of guerrilla band.
The Night Stalkers are a group of vampire hunters.
People who kill vampires professionally. I'm getting a call.
Sundogs are a special bullet that Hannibal King designed for hunting vampires, and they're bullets that let out a burst of UV light, which actually has them sort of implode from the inside.
Holy shit.
Blade was one of the first movies to do that Matrix style of bullets flying through the air. I remember seeing Blade, the first installment, which was made a year before Matrix was released, and they did these crazy, the bullets flying by, Stephen Dorff's character, and I just thought it was so amazing. You do that now and they'll say, that's our Matrix ripoff, and you're like, no, it's a Blade ripoff.
Designing the weapons for the Blade pictures is of some critical importance because a certain amount of the fan base responds to Wesley's use of these amazing vampire-killing weapons.
I wanted some kind of new bladed weapon for Blade to use. It needed to be something interesting and something new.
We did add this chain weapon, which is a very aggressive whipping short sword that has a blade that ejects out with this silver chain. The way that I approached this was to meet with David, to look over the pages in the script, and then take those ideas and create a technology look that was believable but still had a science fiction aesthetic but a reality aesthetic to this techno horror movie. The creative process of developing the various designs with David is really pretty straightforward. He describes something in the script and it is somewhat vague because it's the initial idea. And then I present him with the idea like maybe it could unfold.
UV arc. Whoa.
Ryan and Jess, they're handling big weapons. They gotta look like they've been doing this for the better part of their lives.
This bad boy's half as hot as the sun and can cut through vampires like a knife through butter.
The idea in the very first draft that I read was that it's sort of like a cheese slicer.
Weapons management and just attitude.
I just go and you're gone.
While I was looking at real weapons that the military are developing, I added this idea of like a little CD-ROM drive.
Electronic pistol.
David loved it. So he actually incorporated it into the script, and Hannibal King records his shooting, his death score with the vampires.
Hedges, supersize me, sweetheart.
One of the coolest one is the Mud Flap Girl shotgun.
It's a modified version of the Army's objective individual combat weapon.
And it's like a big modified shotgun that will shoot 3 different types of ammunition. Missiles, sundogs, which are bullets with UV detonators inside. When they enter a vampire, they actually let out a burst of UV light, which actually has them sort of implode from the inside. It's a really disgusting thing to watch, watching somebody implode from the inside. He'll also shoot stakes, these things right here.
Basically, whatever gets you hard, this puppy will pump them out.
I have a 7-shooter revolver. have a lot of toys. A knife that comes out of the tip of her boot. A special compound bow. It's juiced up to a point that it can just you know, go right through almost everything, including a bulletproof vest, which is really cool.
I just feel like when they put me in all the wardrobe, there's just a gun everywhere. You know, I get out of the shower in the morning and guns are falling out of body parts. Can we just go right ahead and sign you up for one of our secret Night Stalker Dakota rings?
You have to find things outside of just the normal kick and punch. There's only so many ways you're going to kick and punch.
The challenging part is to come to this project with new and innovative things and things you haven't seen before.
You'll see an athlete in like track or something do something, you go, wow, that's cool. I can turn that into a fighting move and use that in something.
We actually design some of the stunts or some of the stunts that the director has in mind.
There's a lot more straight action in this film, going back to very real, gritty, practical action, which is fun and exciting and always a challenge.
We are completely going back to old school, old-fashioned fighting techniques like street fighting.
I love working with Wes. I worked with Wes on Blade 1.
B marker.
He is a great actor, but he is an excellent martial artist. Sometimes people study martial arts and they'll be in one particular style, and so they can't look outside of that style to learn something else. But some people you find are able to cross those lines and go and explore other places. Wes is one of those guys. Wes has cadences and things that he does that nobody else does.
He's a pretty athletic individual. He's capable of doing a lot of his own stunts. However, insurance comes in, the company says, no, we can't let him do that, so in comes Clay. The line between using an actor and a stunt double comes when the risk that's involved is too great for the actor. Like the swords, for instance. We sort of take a stunt and look at it as, okay, well, this is too much risk for them to take when we could shoot it from a different angle and use a double. We really don't allow them to do anything that's gonna be too dangerous for them.
Clay's pretty amazing martial artist himself. He has to learn how to move like Wes, though, which is very difficult.
Wesley's incredible with rhythm. It's so interesting to watch, and nobody else has it. Nobody else in the industry. I try my darndest to mimic this, and I do my best, but he's really good at making the fights and the stunts look interesting because of the beats that he takes.
Clay is an amazingly talented guy. I think he continues to surprise us all with the stuff he pulls off.
These stunt guys are such pros. I mean, they've been doing this their whole life. They just really make the actors look great. When you have a good stunt man, he's making me look really good.
Most times, people don't look at, well, how should that character fight? And the character's fighting should match the character. The way we had made Ryan's character, when he fights, it was haymakers and good old gritty knees and elbows and stuff like that. With Jessica, we had a lot of stunt guys who were pretty impressed with her up there. All of the fighting in Phoenix Towers, I was really happy with. We had Triple H, so we made sure that some of his signature moves were put in there and that he could do his own stuff.
We work close in hand with the effects department to try and make sure that things are done on a safe and friendly level.
I'm in charge of all the practical physical effects that happen in front of the camera. What we're trying to do is keep a lot of that look being physical and being real so people aren't just acting with imaginary backgrounds.
We jumped a car out of the back of a semi-truck.
We had to sit down with Clay and work out the dynamics of how we could do it. You know, is it something we could actually do as a stunt? Could we actually have somebody drive this car? That's the sort of stuff that we have to kind of sit down and engineer and figure out. And then could we actually have somebody drive this car? Was it physically possible to do?
One of my favorite things to do in the business was driving and sliding cars around. So when the script called for, Blade to do some fancy driving, I got really excited about, getting behind the wheel again.
That's a shot that hasn't really been done that way.
The location where we filmed Whistler's hideout was a boathouse that was a historic landmark. There were a series of explosions. There were over 40 of them when all was counted. Shockingly, we didn't do any real damage to the boathouse. The pyrotechnic guys absolutely knew what they were doing and did an amazing job.
It's a collaborative kind of effort.
We're all here to make a great project.
Sunlight, right? What about crosses? Do they still work mostly in this day and age?
Put the movie together so that it tells the story in the best possible way. I mean, that's what we are, is we're storytellers.
That's a good point. And what about garlic? Does that work on a Hindu vampire?
We start getting dailies, which ideally you look at with the director.
I want to restore that, but at the very beginning of that diatribe,
I then take what the intent of the scene as I understand it from the script, as I understand it from the director.
Can I see the start of the long version again?
And I plunge right in and start cutting the scenes as they come in. And of course, the film is shot out of order. You use the script as the basis for figuring out how to cut that particular scene.
I suppose next you're going to be telling us that Bigfoot's in on the conspiracy too.
We never lose sight of the character.
Maybe you could give us some pointers? Yeah. Let me go back. So how do
if you have to stop the action for 0.2 of a second so that you can get a character moment in, you do it. You don't just go cut, 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 cut. Blade realizes that there's another character named Whistler who has come on the scene.
Whistler's daughter.
Originally, it wasn't written and staged to happen this way. This shot here of Ryan saying Whistler was shot several weeks after they shot the scene. And it allowed us to have him yell Whistler at a different point in the scene where we were able to intensify the dramatic realization that Wesley hears this name, Whistler, which has been very important to him. And this introduces us officially to Abby.
This way!
The process of shaping a movie affects enormously how the audience perceives the story and how they come to understand the characters.
Here's an example of the editing process. In this scene, Blade shoots the character Gedge with a silver stake because Blade thinks Gedge is a vampire. This is a great shot of Wesley Snipes as Blade walking to Gedge. It takes a little long, though, for Blade to get to Gedge, and then we see Blade do something, but we can't tell what it is he does. We need to see more, but remember this body movement that Blade makes. We're going to use it. Now here's a wide shot that was filmed with another camera at the same time as the medium shot. It shows everything in terms of the characters and geography. But I can't use this shot until the first camera gets out of the frame. When I cut from the medium to the wide, I can shorten the walk and show what Blade is doing. The wide shot gives us enough information so we understand what's happening, but the move Blade makes could be better. Here's another shot where Wesley's move is cool, and we see him kick the gun away much more clearly, and as the camera moves in closer, we see Gedge with the stake. It's a great shot, and it tells the whole story. Remember that body effort move? When I use it with the kicking shot, it now completely makes sense. Now let's watch the rest of the scene in the wide shot.
Staked you with silver. Why aren't you ash?
Why aren't you smarter? Not a vampire, dumb shit! Set your sorry ass up.
Yes, we see everything that happens, but we're missing the great character moments the actors are giving us. We need to see those. As an example, the scene reaches a point where two things are happening at the same time. Gedge dies as the police helicopter with its searchlight arrives. We don't see the exact moment when Gedge dies because I cut to Wesley's face as the light hits it. It's more powerful graphically, not to show Gedge's moment of death. Blade realizes he's been had, and his reaction is terrific and stoic, something we could not see in the wide shot. This is what editing does for a movie. It shows the audience the impact of the action and geography of the story, and with strong drama, the important moments in an actor's performance. Let's watch the scene now, edited almost as it is in the movie.
Staked you with silver. Why aren't you ash?
Why aren't you smarter? Not a vampire, dumb shit! Set your sorry ass up.
In terms of the perception of the Dracula character, when we meet him the way it was originally shot, we were holding off his transformation. He didn't come across as being really threatening. We decided to introduce him as a scarier character earlier on. So we reshot a scene and changed the introduction of his character so that we got a glimpse. It was capable of being very nasty.
You shouldn't have woken me.
Both of my editors, Howard and Conrad, sometimes they would come back with something that was quite different than what I was envisioning. But I think if I had done the opposite, if I had told them cut it like this, we never would have seen that version. And because of that, we were able to go into some directions that were kind of unexpected. I like to work that way with my crew. I like to get their unfettered opinions sometimes, and sometimes you'll get a very pleasant surprise.
Ready to die.
I was born ready, motherfucker.
There was one particular scene that Wesley was supposed to be in that he wasn't in. He wasn't available to us that day. And Conrad, of his own accord, took some footage from an entirely different scene and just cut it in, and it worked perfectly. And everyone was shocked. It was as if Wesley had been in the scene. And the audience will never be able to tell.
Silver hollow points.
Done. It was amazing.
Sometimes the scariest monster of all is the one in the mirror.
Definitely.
Gabby shot this brilliantly using multiple cameras, and not just 2 or 3 cameras. He often was shooting not just the action sequences, often the dialogue sequences as well, with 4, 5, 6 cameras or more for some of the major action sequences. A happy challenge is to take this very rich visual, spatial movement of these various cameras and connect a series of shots that really maximize the impact of all these individual pieces. We could cut any of these scenes a number of different ways with a number of variations that would be equally valid. There's always one way that is a little bit better than any other. Telling the story, getting across the character, making the action play as strongly as it could. That really was the challenge.
And throw.
There's a certain number of fantastical elements that come with a Blade film that need digital help. There's ashings, which is the way vampires die.
The ashing shots take quite a bit of time because there are so many different levels of production that go into it.
David decides what the action is and how it's covered, but it all starts with photographing a real stunt guy.
We take it into our post facility, and we will match move the actual actor, tracking his arm motion, his leg motion, which gives us a digital model, or cyber scan. So now we're replacing the real actor as we start to disintegrate him with this model.
There are some shots that at any given time might have up to like 8, 9 people working on the shot at once, from putting in up to 7 different layers just for the body of the guy ashing alone.
We just kept adding layers until we thought it looked great. There's skeletal layers, and then there's dust, there's smoke.
The layer just underneath the skin before we get to the bits of bone, what we called ash man, gives the impression that there's that layer of bloody skin underneath him. Once all these elements are generated in the 3D world, they're handed off to a compositor who will put them all together and render out the final shot. David's script and David's mind is, how can we raise the bar? How can we one-up the last movie? King's gun, called the Sundog, fires UV bullets, which explode from the inside of a vampire. So now we have to disintegrate him from the inside out.
Probably the best Sundog ashing is the introduction of Ryan's character into the film. All of a sudden, a security guard, half-ashed, comes smashing through the mirror.
We've put like a sphere inside him that emanates strobe-like light. As those puncture through, his bone bits are exploding off of him. It's combining some of the same elements of deterioration, but we're trying to effectively show that it's from the inside out. We worked on that ashing the longest. We started that first and we finished that last.
We ashed more people than the previous films combined. We just kept ashing.
A great shot in the film, I think that everyone will like, is a big, wide, dramatic crane down of what we call the blood farm shot. This is our big establishing shot of the bodies in the bags. We prevised a shot, big camera move, craning down, which first, we weren't sure how we were going to accomplish the move because it required 12 layers of bodies. And of course, the art department was only building 2 layers.
Production had put together 2 or 3 layers of bodies, but in the shot, it was supposed to look like there was an endless sea of them. To get a shot that started so high up, ended so low, and was kind of going from screen right to left at the same time, we brought in a rig that was motion control. There's a process by which a programmed camera head or dolly is brought in so that whatever the camera does, we can repeat exact background plates.
Start with the 2 layers, and every layer had to have a green screen behind, and then move it back, shoot it again, move it back, shoot it again, move it back, shoot it again, and so forth.
We got in there at like 5 in the morning in a freezing set in the middle of winter in Vancouver. No lights, nothing. Spent, a good 8 hours putting this thing together. And in motion control, it was tough to do, but it came out really, really well. A lot of the shots we got, we could not have gotten without motion control. Just the sheer ability to repeat complex camera moves.
There's a neat shot where David wanted Blade to make an escape out of the police station, where we used the real actors on green screen and shot them with motion control.
If you can capture it in camera via motion control photography, green screen work, various plate photography, and composite it together, well, you have reality.
When we went to the screening room to look at the visual effects shots, David was much more often pleased than displeased.
Music can have an enormous effect on what happens emotionally with a scene. We never really duplicated ourselves. In this movie, it's kind of its own beast and it had its own specific needs.
The Blade experience is pretty specific. They're kind of street, they're kind of sexy.
He's an action hero, but he's a black action hero.
Wes has a certain kind of way of moving and just being in front of the camera. It's just really cool and really spare. So you want the music to reflect that.
Blade is quite a twisted character. He's a hero, but yet tragic. He's half human, half vampire. So I think musically, to find something that fits him, I think it's quite challenging.
In the previous Blade, always had a high techno sound, very, very strong, good music. But to me, it never gave the urban of Blade. Because Blade's a tough motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? What makes him such a good hero is that urban toughness that comes out in some of the scenes. So my approach was to maybe see if I could find a few tunes or a few things that could, complement that element of it that hasn't been maybe discovered by other composers of the previous films.
I wanted the RZA's sensibilities interwoven throughout the soundtrack and throughout the traditional score.
This is just a collaboration, you know what I mean?
It was sort of halfway in between techno or urban, maybe a more traditional orchestral score. For the traditional score, we found a young composer named Ramin Djawadi, who worked with Hans Zimmer, who is a very well-known composer. He was young and eager and wanted to explore, and he really liked the idea of working hand-in-hand with the RZA.
The hard part is to incorporate orchestra in modern electronics. The orchestra starts to sound small, so the trick was to make the combination work.
We have 2 really willing participants in what is kind of an experiment.
It's a very unusual score, but I think it suits the film in a good way.
Doing the soundtrack this way has definitely been an experiment because you have 2 experts in very different fields of music.
Ramin, who's a super smart killer composer, and I was able to kind of learn a few things from them as well as bring my own flavor into it and institute my own ideas.
I see you alone, surrounded by enemies.
You show a rough cut of the scene to your composers. They come up with some ideas. You might then change the cut a little bit based on what they came up with.
It can be quite difficult. What I usually do is I play it over and over, and then ideas usually come.
I had a family once.
David, you know, wasn't too hard on me, but he definitely let me know what he liked and what he didn't like. He wasn't shy to say, that's not working.
A vampire.
Just finding that right tone, finding the Blade-ness of the music.
At the same time, he gave us freedom.
Because RZA is working so closely with Ramin, it should really feel like the whole thing is one experience.
It's a give and take, it's back and forth.
This is a good example of RZA and I working together. RZA had worked through the entire cue already. He gave this to me and just said, see what you can add to this, because it's a long cue. He gave me this all split out, the drums and vocals all separate. So the beginning I actually kept pretty much untouched. When he runs over the cars, he wanted some orchestral stingers. That's a breakdown that I added. I basically pulled out the percussion and just had an orchestral swell. The breakdown. Putting it all together, it sounds like this then. This is a good movie moment. David always was asking for more organic sound, so then what is there? Of course, there's guitar and bass. So these are actually all guitars, just very processed.
This one has the most memorable themes. There's a theme for Blade, a theme for Drake, and they're just memorable.
David really wanted to bring out the emotion in Blade and the complexity of the character.
A really good score will work very subtly and will operate on the audience's emotions without them even realizing that. Conversely, a bad score can really kill a film. I really love what we call Abigail's theme.
I personally saw this theme more as our global emotional theme.
Sometimes there's just a scene that you can't crack, you can't figure it out.
We've tried stuff, we've thrown it out.
Do you want to talk to him about a little?
It's so good though. I want part of it to be in the body of the film so that even when it comes back in the end credits, it's familiar. Do you know what I mean? And then you can hear the whole tune. Even just a few bars of it somewhere.
Sometimes it's a tug of war.
That part where it's going dun, 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 because it still has strut. That part, the dun, dun.
We've taken some wrong turns along the way and we've doubled back, reworked.
RZA took a stab, Ramin took a stab, and you're just going, why can't we get this right? We can't find the sweet spot. We can't find this sort of one theme.
That right feel.
E, F sharp. Especially if you up all weekend and you come with this great piece of music and you play it, it's like, you're like,
It's one of those that we're still wrestling with.
But you know, you go back to the drawing board.
It's at the 11th hour. We've got everything else done. We still can't figure out what we're going to do in this one scene. We'll figure it out. I'm sure we'll be okay, but it just happens that way sometimes.
But hopefully we get it right more than we get it wrong. We're up in this church, in this holistic university in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. Ramin composed using a synthesizer and sampled instruments, and now we're laying in the real ones.
Recording in different sections, we mainly do it for control purposes. We can, in the mix, go back and simply push the brass more, the strings more.
My music is being played by an orchestra. People in my neighborhood never would expect no shit like that. They think that we too cool to listen to classical, or we too cool to play an instrument. I'm stuck in these 88 keys. I'm not able to pick up a brass, but I'm able to pull up a parameter on my keyboard, and I'm able to play a brass line, I'm able to play a flute line or a string line. And I would love to be a violinist, but I don't have that talent. Unfortunately, modern technology has stuck in all this synthesizers, so you could just basically vibe in.
When you take 2 or 3 people that maybe have slightly different sensibilities, and if you can figure out a way to make them work together, I think the end result can be more interesting than what either of them would have done on their own.
Smile. Cheese, motherfucker!
Music and sound are sort of the unsung heroes of film because they oftentimes work on a much more subtle, subliminal level.
No help here.
The two of us put all the sound in the movie that isn't music.
Sound editors are often referred to as sound designers.
Aaron tells me some of the things to do with dialogue, and I tell him some of the stuff to do with sound effects.
Sound editors have earned the term sound designers because it implies there's more to it than just cutting and pasting.
It's the sound accompaniment to storytelling, and it's also a way of transcending the limits of what was there on the day of the shoot.
You look so distraught!
We're here at Tadeo in Hollywood. We're doing the final sound and music and dialogue mix.
It's an enormously creative part of filmmaking, sound design.
People don't realize how much sound really affects the movie-going experience. It really can have a major effect.
Hey, dickface, you seen my dog? Have you tried the lobby?
Drake, we did a lot of work on his voice to make him a little more evil.
Tom Cruise, I got you beat.
Some very subtle things to try to give it a sense of otherworldliness.
And you'd like me to kill him, wouldn't you?
And that really has to do with storytelling in a large way.
Blade, ready to die.
Don't let it turn inward.
You can put heart in it.
It already has.
You can put something that can be funny or cute or really mean or aggressive.
I know.
In the movie, we have the virus that attacks the cells and they engage and destroy them. And they're terriers eating really close. So they go, Another example is the vampire hisses. I thought it should be in a very aggressive, beyond human, something that had to bite. The thing that seemed to have the abrasiveness was ice skating scrapes. They just have a very chiseling, abrasive quality.
And welcome to the Foley stage. Of course, Foley comes from Jack Foley, who invented this system in the late 40s. Previous to that, all sound effects were cut by hand. Maybe for Blade, this will be just right. And in fact, well, you be the judge. A machete, used that way.
Sometimes what you perceive as one sound is actually made up of 5 or 6 sounds all on top of each other.
I would say there's probably 200 or 300 individual sounds in every big scene like that action scene.
The only scream that I thought was a little weird, well, it's right on the fence. You tell me, there's one vampire that ashes that gets tossed over the side of the ramp. Sounds a little Wile E. Coyote. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Or
Yeah,
did you...
I made that note, but I kind of like it because it's a little over the top.
It is. It's the one where he's kind of going, wah! You know, like that.
But that was good.
Who thought it was over the top but good? All right, fine. We'll keep it. That's how these decisions are made.
The first rule of Foley is, there are no rules. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll do one sound on one track and another on another track, play them together, and when you hear them in totality, it has the right sound.
We're almost done.
do this for a living.
We are looking for a special look. We wanted something really edgy, something interesting, so creatively. We are painting. Cinematographers in the past doing photochemically. Photochemically, I could say, oh, make it bluer, cool. Oh, it's very cool, that image. You see, now it's cool. Oh, let's make it very warm. Let's make it incredibly warm. But that's it. That's what photochemically I could do. But nowadays, with the possibilities of working digitally, with the digital intermediate, Jill can separate different levels. What we wanted to do with Blade is to give it a different look.
So I'll go back to a normal image without our color treatment. It's really still a great look, but what we really wanted to do is focus on Blade. What we've done is increase the contrast. We've desaturated most of the color, but we chose to keep the red. Now through this chase scene, you're gonna see bright flashes of red, which are his cape flapping around, and then you've got high contrast, which really emphasizes the motion. So we've created a look that really fits with this whole sequence.
Basically, the only colors that you get are the bright reds. When I photographed this scene, we didn't have Wesley in his light, so to speak. My options were to actually brighten everything in order to see his face, which will take away the mood of the corridor, and it would not match with the rest of the scene, or make him into a silhouette.
This is the ultimate result right here, and I can show you the original without any color timing. Now, what we've created, which is still our high contrast look that will fit in with the rest of the scene, but we're able to just pick out Wesley's face.
That was our first day of principal photography, and we say, I cannot believe it. We are doing Blade Trinity with the most wonderful blue sky day and the most glorious day Vancouver has ever seen in 25 years.
We've done a little bit of desaturation on the characters and a little overall contrast. The blue sky, still a little bit too blue, even though we kind of like the colors that we're getting on the characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out that blue sky from the characters. I'm going to go and create a key. All the blue is what I'm affecting here on the screen. And now I can easily dial down, without affecting the characters, that blue sky in the background.
The Wesley looks great, but now Jessica being so white.
I can darken her down and maybe give her a little bit more flesh tone, make her a little bit warmer color, you know, a little more pink in her cheeks kind of thing, without affecting the sky, without looking obvious. It's a very subtle thing, but now we're able to balance her in with the scene a little bit more.
It's for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
This is the shot without the treatment. But, like this shot here, looks just a little kind of normal, still a nice shot, but it's a little bit more normal. Really wanted to focus on the harshness of this fight. Now this is after we've smoothed everything out, matching shot to shot, and now we have our high contrast look, but bringing out the red on their shirts. The flashes from the swords really stand out now. Okay, so this is all without any type of special treatment. You can see some shots go blue here. These are actual visual effects shots. And here we've matched in the visual effects shots, so now they don't seem like they're out of place.
This is a total product of the digital suite.
Well, we've had 3 different endings that we've tested, and each one has different scenes or different moods that are being explored. The ending that appears on the extended version of the DVD, Blade rises from the dead. You get the sense that he may indeed feed on this poor woman, and Lord only knows what will happen. And if there were another film, perhaps then it would be the Night Stalkers going after Blade or something like that. Contrary to popular opinion, Blade never died in any of the endings. There was this big rumor that Blade was going to die. We never filmed an ending where he died. We never scripted an ending where he died.
It's a cool gig, though. You gotta love it.
We talked about the possibility of spinning off into a Night Stalkers film and having them go after a different kind of menace.
The legacy is continuing. You have Wesley as Blade on one hand, and then you have Night Stalker on the other. We'll see where it goes.
It's difficult for me to envision doing yet a 4th film. I would never say never. You never know.
I
would definitely be interested in doing a Night Stalkers spin-off.
Are you crazy? Are you high?
I'm having such a great time. It would be great. I would definitely be into that.
I'm enjoying every second of this movie. I don't think I've ever had as much fun as I am on this movie. Jesse Biel and I this morning were saying that we want to do just a whole movie with no dialogue and just butt kicking left, right, and center.
I mean, this has been a wonderful experience and exciting. It's given me a chance to exploit another aspect of my creativity. People really liked the character and wanted to come back one more time. Maybe we encore it somehow. I might be in a wheelchair and my fangs would be like down to here, you know. Come here, you vampire. You remember when I used to jump through the window and shoot you?
Hi, I'm David Goyer, writer of the soon-to-be-released film Blade Trinity, the third film in the Blade series, and I'm here today with the director of Blade Trinity, David Goyer.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So, the script for Blade Trinity, I personally happen to think it's the best of the bunch, but why did you choose to direct it?
The script was funny, and it was different, and I thought it was an opportunity to not do what the audience would expect. And one of the things that I thought was cool about the first Blade film and the second Blade film is that they were very different. They didn't just rehash the first film, and it kind of turns the whole vampire mythology up on its end. Okay, so I have a question for you now. You know, unique weaponry has always been a staple of the Blade films. How did you feel that I handled the weaponry in this film?
Well, you stuck to what was written on the page, so that was a nice start. Actually, I was a big fan of what happened with Abigail's UV arc. I think that turned out to be a real crowd pleaser. It was very cool. I like the sun dogs, which are these sort of UV bullets. I like the way that the ashings are different when, you know, Hannibal King fires that gun. I thought Wesley's chain knife at the beginning of the film is a really cool addition. That was neat, too. So I wrote all three Blade films. I know there were points during the production of the first two Blade films where the directors wanted to curse me as a writer because I had written things that were difficult to film, but I mean, that never happened to you, right?
You know, it just happens, and I know that there were times when Norrington and Guillermo had to call, you know, you up and say, we got to change what's on the page, and you know, sometimes it happens. That's the difference between directing something and writing it. Writing the screenplay it's just the battle plan, but as we all know, sometimes the battle unfolds in a way that's different from the way it was planned.
Okay, so in my mind, Wesley Snipes was always the definitive Blade. He was the person that I had in mind when I wrote the first script. But for the new film, as a director, you've definitely made some interesting sort of offbeat casting choices. Can you tell me about those? Jessica Biel, Ryan Reynolds, Parker Posey.
Look, as a director, I like to do things that people wouldn't expect, and I like to cast people in roles that they wouldn't necessarily expect to see. Ryan Reynolds was known primarily for comedy, and certainly the character of Hannibal King is comedic to a certain extent, but he's also a really credible action figure, and I knew Ryan could pull it off. Jessica Biel, again, plays something different. I mean, she's sort of the version of Linda Hamilton in T2 in this movie. She's just a complete killing machine. And Parker Posey, again, not who you would expect for this kind of film, but that's why I like it. That's why I think it's different and exciting. She's kind of the female equivalent of what Stephen Dorff was in the first film. You know, again, we didn't cast a Christopher Lee type as a vampire. We went in a different direction. And I just think it spices it up. It's not what you would expect. Now, I've noticed that you've been hanging out on the official Blade Trinity website on the message board. What's it like mixing it up with the fans?
It's an interesting way to get their feedback, and you know, the fans represent the core audience for films like this, and you know, they're geeks just like me when I was growing up. But I didn't have the internet; I couldn't connect with directors and writers and producers, so it's just a fun way to have a dialogue. All right, so there are all these rumors on the internet about whether or not there's going to be a Blade 4 or a Night Stalkers film. Now that you're a big hotshot director and you're in the know, what can you tell us about that? Are the rumors true? Can you dispel them?
Yeah, you had to ask that question, didn't you? Yeah, there are a lot of rumors flying around on the net. Is there going to be a Blade 4? Is Blade going to die? Is Blade going to turn evil? Is there going to be a Night Stalkers? Is Blade going to make a cameo in the Night Stalkers? The truth is, any one of those scenarios could happen. And I'm certainly not going to give any spoilers away.
Oh, that's a good point.
Okay, so in Blade Trinity, we created the ultimate vampire, Drake. As a writer, how did you rise to that challenge? How did you top yourself for the other 2 films?
It's difficult. I mean, I remember being worried in the second film what we were going to do to kind of up the stakes. And then I thought, oh my God, now I've got to do it for a third film and up the stakes yet again. But, you know, I knew we had to come up with something different. And it just seemed like we might as well go back to the well, go back to the source, which meant the original Marvel Comics, Tomb of Dracula comics that Blade was a supporting character in. And I just thought, well, who better to have Blade go up against than Dracula? So one last thing. I want to ask you about the ending. Did you film the ending I wrote?
I shot what the writer wrote, and that's one version of what I shot, but we also did some other versions, and we're playing around with what we think works best. And I can't guarantee that what the writer wrote in that case will be what ends up in the film that's released in theaters, although there will at least be a version of that on the DVD.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for joining me, David.
No problem.